The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, each drop like a tiny fist against the glass. I sat in the sterile conference room of Morrison and Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious consulting firms, watching the city blur into abstract streaks of light and shadow. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table. "Sarah, we need to talk," my boss, Richard Morrison, had said just 20 minutes earlier. His voice carried that particular tone, the one that made your stomach drop before your brain even processed the words. Now he sat across from me, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the chaos of the storm outside. His navy suit was impeccable, his tie straight, but there was something in his eyes that seemed different. Nervous, maybe. He shuffled through some papers, avoiding my gaze. "Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual warmth. "Your performance over the past quarter hasn't met our expectations. The Henderson account, the quarterly projections you submitted, they were subpar." I felt my chest tighten. "Richard, I can explain." "No explanations needed." He held up a hand, finally meeting my eyes. "The bottom line is this: you're replaceable. Everyone is. This is business, not personal." The word replaceable hit me like a physical blow. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, canceled vacations, all reduced to that single devastating word. "You're firing me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're letting you go, effective immediately. Jessica will handle your accounts moving forward. She's eager to prove herself." Jessica, 26 years old, fresh out of Columbia Business School, with legs that went on for miles and a laugh that made every man in the office stop what they were doing. I trained her myself, shared my strategies, my client relationships, my methods. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I see," I managed to say, though my throat felt like sandpaper. Richard slid a folder across the table. "Your severance package is generous. 2 months' salary, continued health benefits for 60 days, and a positive reference. Sign here." I stared at the papers, the words swimming before my eyes. This was it. My career, my financial security, my identity, all of it ending with a signature on a corporate form. But as I reached for the pen, something made me look up at Richard. Really look at him. His jaw was clenched, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm I recognized, the same nervous tell he displayed during our quarterly reviews when the numbers didn't add up. That's when I remembered the weekend in Vermont. It had been 6 months ago, during the Morrison and Associates annual retreat. I'd been walking back to my cabin after dinner when I'd seen Richard and Jessica emerging from the woods together, their clothes disheveled, Jessica's lipstick smudged. They'd frozen when they saw me, and Richard had mumbled something about showing Jessica the hiking trails. At the time, I'd been naive enough to believe it. Richard had been married to Margaret for 15 years. They had 2 teenage daughters, a house in the Hamptons, and what appeared to be a solid marriage. But now, sitting in the sterile conference room, watching him try to justify destroying my career, the pieces fell into place. I set down the pen and looked directly into his eyes. "Before I sign this," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I have to ask you something." His hand stopped drumming. "What?" I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice to just above a whisper. "Does she know about the trip?" The change in his face was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from his cheeks, his eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like a man who'd just seen his entire world collapse. "What did you say?" he whispered back. "The Vermont trip. Does Margaret know about what really happened between you and Jessica?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His hands began to shake, actually shake, and he glanced toward the door as if expecting his wife to burst through it at any moment. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his voice cracked on the last word. "I think you do." I sat back in my chair, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in months. "I saw you two that night, coming out of the woods. Jessica's dress was wrinkled, her hair was messed up, and you couldn't look me in the eye for the rest of the weekend." Richard's breathing became shallow. He loosened his tie with trembling fingers. "You're imagining things," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Am I?" I tilted my head, studying his face, because I'm pretty sure I'm not, and I'm also pretty sure that's not the only time it happened. The late-night strategy sessions you two have been having. The way you look at her during meetings. The way she touches your arm when she thinks no one is watching. Sarah, please. Please what? Please sign the papers and disappear quietly? Please pretend I didn't see what I saw? Please let you destroy my career so you can promote your mistress. The word mistress hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. Richard's face had gone from pale to ashen, and I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. It's not what you think, he said finally. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. I stood up, leaving the unsigned papers on the table. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The rain continued to hammer against the windows, but inside the conference room, the silence was deafening. Richard stared at me with the expression of a man who just realized he was standing on quicksand. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had the upper hand. Richard's office felt different now. The same mahogany desk, the same leather chairs, the same view of Central Park stretching out beyond the windows, but everything had shifted. The balance of power had tilted, and we both knew it. Close the door, Richard said quietly, his voice hoarse. I turned the lock and walked back to my chair, taking my time. Outside, the November wind whipped through the trees, sending yellow leaves spiraling past the window like confetti at a funeral. Sarah, I need you to understand something, Richard began, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. What you think you saw? I know what I saw, Richard. I settled back in my chair, crossing my legs. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He rubbed his temples, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. Margaret and I, we've been having problems. For over a year now. We barely speak anymore. She's consumed with her charity work. The girls are always at school or with friends, and He trailed off, staring out at the park. And you decided to have an affair with a woman young enough to be your daughter? It wasn't supposed to happen. His voice was barely audible. Jessica was working late one night. We were both stressed about the Henderson presentation, and one thing led to another. It was a mistake that's been going on for 6 months. Richard's silence was answer enough. Does Jessica know you're firing me to protect your secret? I asked. She doesn't know about this conversation. He gestured weakly toward the conference room. She thinks the termination is purely performance-based. How convenient for both of you. Sarah, please. I know how this looks, but how it looks. I leaned forward, my voice hardening. It looks like you're destroying my career to cover up your affair. It looks like you're throwing away 3 years of my dedicated service to protect your reputation and your marriage. It looks like you're a coward. Richard flinched as if I'd slapped him. I'm not a coward. I'm trying to protect my family. By lying to them. By cheating on your wife. By ruining innocent people's lives. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The company is struggling. Margaret's family has connections that could destroy us if they found out about this. And the girls. God, the girls would hate me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the look on his face when he'd called me replaceable, the casual cruelty in his voice when he dismissed 3 years of my life with a wave of his hand. So your solution is to make me disappear? I thought it would be cleaner this way. A quiet separation, no questions asked. Clean for you, maybe. What about me? What about my career? My reputation? My financial security? Richard's hands were shaking again. The severance package is hush money, and we both know it. A knock at the door interrupted us. Mr. Morrison? Jessica's voice came through the wood, bright and cheerful. The Henderson clients are here for their 3 o'clock meeting. Richard's face went white. Tell them I'll be right there. Should I prepare the conference room? Yes. Sarah won't be joining us. I heard Jessica's heels clicking away down the hallway, and Richard turned back to me with desperation in his eyes. Sarah, I'm begging you. Please, just sign the papers and let this go. I'll increase the severance. 6 months' salary instead of 2. Full benefits for a year. Whatever you need. What I need is my job, my reputation, my dignity. I can't give you those things. Not now. Not with everything that's at stake. Then we have a problem. Richard stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. What do you want? Money? A reference? A position at another firm? Just tell me what it will take. I want you to admit what you've done. I want you to acknowledge that you're not firing me for performance issues. You're firing me because I'm a liability to your secret. I can't do that. Then I guess Margaret will have to hear about Vermont from someone else. Richard spun around, his face flushed with panic. You wouldn't. Try me. We stared at each other across the office, the city sprawling beneath us like a battlefield. In the distance, I could hear the muffled sounds of a Henderson meeting beginning, Jessica's laugh, the rustling of papers, the clink of coffee cups. She's pregnant, Richard said suddenly, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. What? Jessica. She's pregnant. She told me this morning. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my mouth fall open, my carefully constructed composure cracking. That's why you're firing me now, I said, the pieces clicking into place. You need to promote her, give her a secure position before she starts showing. You need to make sure she's financially stable, and you can't do that with both of us on the payroll. Richard's silence confirmed my suspicions. Does she know? About Margaret? About your daughters? She knows I'm married. She thinks Margaret and I are separated. Another lie. Sarah, please. This is bigger than just me now. There's a baby involved. Jessica's career, her future. What about my future? I stood up, my voice rising. What about the 3 years I've given this company? What about the clients I've brought in, the deals I've closed, the nights I've stayed here until midnight making sure everything was perfect? I know, and I'm grateful. Grateful? You're grateful. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're about to destroy my life, and you're grateful? Richard moved toward his desk, his hand hovering over the phone. Sarah, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Security will escort you out. No. I sat back down, crossing my arms. I'm not going anywhere. Not until we figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. You're terminated, effective immediately. The papers are signed. I never signed them. Richard's hand froze over the phone. What? I never signed the severance papers. Which means, technically, I'm still employed. And as an employee, I have certain rights, including the right to report workplace harassment and discrimination. You're threatening to file a lawsuit. I'm threatening to tell the truth. About your affair, about Jessica's pregnancy, about the real reason you're firing me. The question is, are you willing to risk everything to keep your secret? The phone rang, shrill and insistent. Richard stared at it for a moment, then looked at me. That's probably Margaret, he said quietly. She's supposed to meet me for dinner tonight to discuss Thanksgiving plans. Better answer it, I said, settling back in my chair. We wouldn't want her to worry. Richard's hand trembled as he reached for the phone, and I knew that whatever happened next, there was no going back for either of us. The phone continued to ring, each shrill note echoing through Richard's office like a countdown to disaster. His hand hovered over the receiver, paralyzed by indecision. Answer it, I said again, my voice calm despite the chaos swirling around us. Richard's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Sarah, please, don't do this. Do what? Sit here while you take a call from your wife? I'm not doing anything, Richard. You're the one who created this situation. He finally picked up the phone, his voice strained. Hello. Richard, darling, I'm running a bit late. Margaret's voice was clear enough that I could hear her through the receiver. Traffic on Fifth Avenue is absolutely dreadful. Should I meet you at the restaurant instead? Actually, Margaret, Richard's eyes darted to me, then back to his desk. I might need to reschedule. Something's come up at work. Oh, that's disappointing. I was looking forward to discussing the guest list for Christmas dinner. Your mother specifically requested that we invite the Andersons this year. Of course, the Andersons. We'll discuss it tomorrow. Is everything all right? You sound strange. Richard's grip on the phone tightened. Everything's fine. Just a complicated client situation. Well, don't work too late. You know how I worry when you're at the office until all hours. The irony wasn't lost on me. Margaret worried about Richard working late, not knowing that some of those late nights had been spent with Jessica in various hotel rooms around the city. I'll be home at a reasonable hour, Richard said, his voice cracking slightly. I love you, darling. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Richard's hand shook as he held the phone. I love you too, Margaret. He hung up and immediately slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. 3 daughters. I said quietly. Emma's 15, Sophie's 17. They both play field hockey, and Sophie's applying to colleges next year. Emma wants to be a veterinarian. Richard looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. How do you know that? Because I've been to your office Christmas parties for 3 years. I've seen the photos on your desk. I've heard you talk about them with pride in your voice. I've watched you leave early for their games and recitals. Sarah, please. Do you think they'll still be proud of their father when they find out about this? Richard's composure finally cracked. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I lie awake at night thinking about what this will do to them? To Margaret? To everyone I care about? Then why are you doing it? Because I'm selfish, he exploded, slamming his hand on the desk. Because I'm a 53-year-old man who felt invisible in his own life, and then this beautiful, intelligent woman started paying attention to me. Because for the first time in years I felt wanted, desired, alive. And now she's pregnant. And now she's pregnant, he repeated, deflating like a punctured balloon. With my child. A child I never planned for, never wanted, but who exists because of my mistakes. Does Jessica know you never wanted the baby? She's excited. She thinks this is our chance to start over, to build something real together. She has no idea that I'm terrified. I studied his face, seeing the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. You're not going to leave Margaret, are you? I can't. The girls, the business, her family's connections. It would destroy everything I've built. So what's your plan? Keep Jessica as a mistress? Set her up in some apartment across town? Visit your secret child on weekends? I don't know. The admission came out as a whisper. I don't know what I'm going to do. But you know what you're going to do about me. I thought I did. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. I underestimated you, Sarah. I thought you'd take the money and walk away quietly. You thought I was weak. I thought you were practical. I thought you'd see the futility of fighting this. Maybe I am practical. Maybe that's exactly why I'm not walking away. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Mr. Morrison? Jessica's voice again, but this time there was something different in her tone. Uncertainty. Yes. The Henderson meeting is finished, but they'd like to schedule a follow-up for next week. Should I put it on your calendar? Richard glanced at me, then back at the door. Yes, that's fine. Also, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal. My blood ran cold. Richard's face went white. Who is it? He asked, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Morrison. She says she decided to come here instead of waiting at the restaurant. The silence in the office was deafening. I could hear Richard's breathing, shallow and rapid. Outside, the wind continued to howl, rattling the windows. Tell her I'll be right out, Richard managed to say. Should I offer her coffee? She seems a bit upset about something. No. Just tell her I'll be right there. Jessica's footsteps retreated down the hallway, and Richard turned to me with panic in his eyes. She knows, he said. Somehow she knows. How could she know? I don't know, but Margaret doesn't make surprise visits to the office. Ever. Something's wrong. Maybe she just wanted to surprise you. You don't understand. Margaret is the most predictable person I know. She plans everything weeks in advance. She doesn't do spontaneous. Richard stood up, straightening his tie with shaking hands. I have to go out there. I have to face her. What are you going to say? I have no idea. He walked to the door, then turned back to me. Sarah, I'm asking you one more time. Please, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't do it. My family doesn't deserve this. You're right, I said quietly. They don't deserve this. They deserve better than you. Richard's face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw not the powerful CEO who had destroyed my career, but a broken man who had lost control of his own life. I know, he whispered. I know they do. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway, leaving me alone in his office. Through the glass partition, I could see Margaret Morrison standing near Jessica's desk, her elegant figure rigid with tension. She was wearing a navy coat and pearls, her graying hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She looked every inch the society wife she was, polished, refined, and utterly unsuspecting. Jessica sat at her desk, her hands folded in her lap, avoiding Margaret's gaze. Even from a distance, I could see the slight rounding of her belly beneath her silk blouse. Richard approached his wife, his movements stiff and unnatural. Margaret turned to him, and even through the glass, I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. "Hello, darling," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the office. "We need to talk." The conversation between Richard and Margaret was taking place in the main reception area, visible through the glass walls of the office. From my position in Richard's office, I had a clear view of what was unfolding, and it was better than any drama I'd ever seen on television. Margaret's voice was low but sharp, like a blade cutting through silk. "Richard, I received a very interesting phone call today. From Helen Patterson. Do you remember Helen?" Richard's face went from pale to ashen. "Margaret, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Helen was at the Morrison and Associates retreat in Vermont last spring. She mentioned seeing you with someone. A young woman. Late at night. Coming out of the woods together." Jessica's head snapped up from her desk, her eyes wide with sudden understanding. She looked between Richard and Margaret, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. That's not what happened," Richard stammered. "Isn't it?" Margaret's voice rose, slightly, drawing the attention of several other employees. "Because Helen seemed quite certain about what she saw. She said she didn't want to say anything at the time, but when she saw the announcement about Jessica's promotion in the company newsletter, she felt she had to speak up." "What announcement?" Richard's voice was barely audible. Margaret pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through her emails. "This announcement, the one that went out this morning. Morrison and Associates is pleased to announce the promotion of Jessica Chun to senior associate, effective immediately." I felt a chill run down my spine. Richard had already processed Jessica's promotion before our conversation, before I'd even signed the severance papers. He'd planned this entire scenario from the beginning. "Richard," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger, "I want you to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Are you having an affair with this woman?" The office had gone completely silent. Even the usual sounds of keyboards clicking and phones ringing had stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting for Richard's response. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced at Jessica, who was staring at him with a mixture of horror and realization. Then he looked at Margaret, his wife of 15 years, the mother of his children, the woman who had stood by him through every challenge and setback. He began, then stopped. "The truth, Richard," Margaret said, her voice breaking slightly. "After 15 years of marriage, I deserve the truth. That's when I made my decision." I stood up from my chair, walked to the door of Richard's office, and opened it. Every eye in the office turned to me as I stepped into the reception area. "Mrs. Morrison," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'm Sarah Williams. I worked for your husband." Margaret turned to me, her elegant features drawn with pain. "Worked? I was terminated this morning. Effective immediately. I don't understand. Richard, you didn't mention." "Mrs. Morrison," I continued, "I was present at the Vermont retreat. I saw what Helen Patterson saw. Your husband and Miss Chun were having an affair." Jessica shot to her feet, her face flushed with anger. "Sarah, you can't." "I can and I will," I said, turning to face her. "Because unlike some people, I believe in the truth." Richard stepped forward, his hand reaching toward me. "Sarah, please, think about what you're doing." "I am thinking about it. I'm thinking about how you called me replaceable this morning. I'm thinking about how you destroyed my career to protect your secret. I'm thinking about how you were willing to throw away 3 years of my dedication to this company for a woman who's been lying to everyone about her relationship with you." "What relationship?" Margaret's voice was sharp, desperate. "Richard, what is she talking about?" Richard's composure finally shattered completely. "Margaret, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." "How terrible?" Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. Richard looked at Jessica, then back at his wife. Jessica is pregnant." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her hand clutching her chest. "Pregnant? It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Richard said, his voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "How long?" Margaret's voice was hollow now, empty of all emotion. 6 months. 6 months." Margaret repeated the words, as if they were in a foreign language. 6 months. You've been lying to me. To our daughters. To everyone. Margaret, please. Don't. Margaret held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't say another word. She turned to Jessica, who was standing frozen behind her desk. And you. You knew he was married. You knew about his children. He told me you were separated, Jessica whispered. Separated? Margaret's laugh was bitter and sharp. We had dinner together last night. We made love this morning before he left for work. Does that sound separated to you? Jessica's face went white, and she sank back into her chair. Richard, you told me. I told you what you wanted to hear, Richard said, his voice flat and defeated. I told you what I thought would make this easier. Easier for who? Jessica's voice was rising, tears streaming down her cheeks. For you. Because it certainly wasn't easier for me, thinking I was helping you escape an unhappy marriage. It wasn't easier for me, falling in love with a man who was lying to me every single day. You're in love with him? Margaret asked, her voice strangely calm. I thought I was, Jessica said, her hand moving to her stomach. I thought we were building something real together. I thought when the baby came, we'd be a family. And now, Jessica looked at Richard with something that might have been hatred. Now I realize I don't know who he is at all. Margaret turned back to her husband, her elegant composure cracking like ice on a frozen pond. 15 years, Richard. 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising our daughters together. And you threw it all away for what? For sex? For excitement? For some fantasy of being young again? Margaret, I loved you, she continued, her voice growing stronger. I trusted you. I believed in us. And you repaid that trust by sleeping with a woman young enough to be our daughter and getting her pregnant. It wasn't about you, Richard said desperately. You did nothing wrong. This was all me. My weakness, my failure. You're right, Margaret said, her voice ice cold. It was your failure. Your choice. Your betrayal. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Jessica. Congratulations on your promotion. I hope it was worth it. Then she looked at me. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'm sorry about your job. Mrs. Morrison, I called out as she reached the elevator. She turned back, her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. Your daughters are lucky to have you, I said. Don't let his choices define your worth. Margaret nodded once, then stepped into the elevator and disappeared. The office remained silent for a long moment. Then Richard turned to me, his face a mask of rage and desperation. Are you satisfied? He demanded. You've destroyed everything. My marriage, my family, my business. No, I said calmly. You destroyed those things. I just refuse to help you cover it up. You've ruined 3 lives today. I've told the truth. What you do with that truth is up to you. Richard stared at me for a long moment, then walked past me toward his office. At the doorway, he paused. Clean out your desk, he said without turning around. Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I don't think they will. Richard turned back to me, confusion replacing anger on his face. I've been recording this conversation, I said, holding up my phone. All of it. Your admission of the affair, your acknowledgement that you fired me to protect your secret, your confession that Jessica's promotion was related to her pregnancy. I'm pretty sure the Department of Labor would be very interested in hearing about workplace discrimination and wrongful termination. Richard's face went white. You can't. I can and I will, unless we renegotiate the terms of my departure. What do you want? My job back. Full back pay. And a public apology for the wrongful termination. That's impossible. After what just happened, you're going to need someone who knows how to handle this company's clients while you deal with your personal crisis. Someone who knows the accounts, the procedures, the relationships. Someone who can keep Morrison and Associates running while your world falls apart. Richard stared at me for a long moment, then looked around the office at the faces of his employees, all of whom had witnessed his humiliation. Fine, he said finally, but this doesn't end here. After the dust settles, after the divorce, after everything calms down, you're gone. That's fine, I said, settling back into my chair. But until then, I'm right here. And Richard, what? You were wrong about one thing. I'm not replaceable. I'm irreplaceable. And now you know it. Richard walked into his office, and slammed the door. Jessica sat at her desk, crying silently. The other employees slowly returned to their work, whispering among themselves. I opened my laptop and began typing, preparing for the chaos that was surely coming. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to clear, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Sometimes the truth is painful. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you knew about your life. But sometimes, it's the only thing that can set you free. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's the only weapon you have left.